Space Case 037, John Cage, Part 1. John Cage. John Cage. He was a composer and music theorist. He was one of those very special people that looked around early in life and saw things that weren't happening right, and he broke from the pack. And when I say things weren't happening right, I mean that he was seeing that everyone was doing the same thing the same way. Steve Jobs, I mean, that was the Apple guy, right? He was one of those that broke away from the pack and said, "Hey, well, you can do it like this." Miles Davis, yet another one. Coltrane. But John Cage, who studied with Arnold Schoenberg, he was way out. We're still trying to figure out what Cage was doing. He was into playing those prepared piano compositions. This is when you put objects like rocks and pencils on the strings of the piano to alter the sound. And he was into chance music too. Look him up, though, if you want the whole bio. But his magnum opus, the one piece that if you've heard of Cage or people that talk about John Cage to some degree, that piece is entitled 4 minutes, 33 seconds, 4:33. This is a piece of music, if you can call it that, in which the pianist takes the stage and sits at the piano for 4 minutes and 33 seconds without playing. And the performance is in the silence and extraneous sounds that the audience hears in that 4.5 minutes. It's still controversial, but it challenges ideas about what we as musicians and audiences think about music performance. You know, is it really just music performance? Is it really just the music coming out? I mean, is there something more to it? I've thought about it a lot during the years since music school, in which we talked about it very little. You know, it was always mentioned in some history book, or I'd catch something about it, even caught a couple of performances of somebody coming out on stage and sitting quietly at the piano. And then I started looking and said, you're supposed to, and there is a lot of sounds. And it made me think about what's happening during a performance. You know, it challenged my ideas, you know, about how every performance is different. You know, even in the same venue with the same players playing the same music. And it gave me, and it still does, that environment plays a role in performance. You know, room temperatures, acoustics, lights, placement of the audiences, placement of the musicians, numbers of the audience's mood and temperament. All these things affect performances. They're deep and profound ideas, but they're well worth thinking about, and they're out there too. I mean, seriously, I played sets in the same venue for 2 or more nights in a row, and every night felt different. You know, and I'm talking about playing with the same group, playing the same set at the same time Friday night, and then doing the same thing Saturday night, and it felt different both nights. You know, and you want to be sensitive enough to realize these things, and I hope that you are. But I'm somewhat digressing. Several years ago, a colleague of mine came by and he dropped something on my desk, and it was 10 Rules for Students and Teachers by John Cage. And it was a copy, and it was obviously taken probably from the original, and it looked like it had been typewritten. It's online. It's easy to find. But there was some really good advice from this person that had thought about music and composed a lot of music. It's sort of more of my practicing without your instrument, but in a different way. You know, not thinking about lines, but thinking about what we do as musicians and how we can get better with the right approaches. You know, and sometimes those approaches are mental approaches. And also finding new approaches of doing this, playing music. I'm going to go out of order, and I'm not going to be able to do all 10 during this podcast, but I'm going to go with my favorite. And my favorite on his list of 10 is Nothing is a Mistake. He writes, nothing is a mistake. There is no win or no fail. There is only make. I mean, think about that. How many people struggle to start something, or to finish something. A friend of mine calls it perfection paralysis. They get caught in that. It's not good enough, so they can't even start it. They can't even put the first note down. They can't even attempt to play the first note or write the first note. And you have to start. In past episodes from last summer, I talked about Steven Nachmanovich's free play, and he says the same thing. You've got to feel comfortable enough to start, and you've got to keep moving on it. We're not going to start perfectly. You're going to have to find your way sometimes in there. A friend of mine sent a guitar track to me, and he says, "Hey, would you come up with a bass line for this?" And I listened to it for a while, and I was really stuck on what to do outside of playing roots or, figuring out what he had there. And I had to keep dropping things in on it, and I started finding my way in there. But initially, no, there was nothing happening. It was just, but I had to start making something. John Cage's rule. There's only one rule: make. We have to start. We have to start learning a line. We have to start writing a line. We have to start writing a composition, and just start, not think about, is this good enough? Writers, authors, people write monographs, articles. They say 10 pages of bad writing is better than no pages of no writing, because you can always fix what you wrote. You can make something out of it. Because what are you doing? You're doing what John Cage said, to start making. You can always go back and repair, and at least you got something done. You've made. I like the way Miles Davis said it. You see the quote all the time: nothing is a mistake. Just start. Start playing bass. Start playing that line. Start up. Stop worrying about it being wrong or not good enough. You can fix it or make it better later. I see my players do that, especially some of my new ones. Learning to play double bass with the bow, especially with the young players that come in and they come from electric bass and they sound good on electric bass. And they start playing with the bow and it doesn't sound the way that they want to sound, i.e. it doesn't sound very good. Their tone's not there. They haven't done it enough. They've never done it. And I have to say, you got to keep moving. You've got to keep working this out. I remember that. I'm an electric bass player that made the double bass, and now I like my tone with the bow. I can live with it. I'm always trying to improve it, but I can deal with it. But I remember a time when it sounded horrible, at least to my ears. I remember one time when I was first studying arco, and I had a teacher, and I was in the studio, and he says, "Hey, play C major." And he goes, "With the bow." And he started laughing, and I was like, this isn't really helping, right? He goes, "I'm just laughing." He goes, "At the expression on your face." He goes, "It's like you hate what you're doing." He says, "It doesn't sound that bad." And that's the reality of it, that if you're making something, it's probably not as bad as you think it is. You hear about this concept, I read a lot about this stuff, especially these days, about mindfulness training. And that's a big part of it, to be and do. And that leads me to Cage's rule number 7. He said, the only rule is work. If you work, it will lead to something. And then in that same number 7, he says, it is the people who do all the work all the time who eventually catch on to things. I eventually caught on to that tone that I wanted. Same for bass players, catch on to the lines that I wanted to play. But you have to work to lead to something. How obvious is that? But it can be difficult to do that. If you're struggling with it, you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, then you don't want to pick up the instrument. But that's the wrong thing to do, because you're getting further from it. For bass players, work on it. Think about it. Use what you have. Talk about it. Be it if you can. Instead of thinking and obsessing on why you can't do something, why you can't execute a line, work on it. Work on it in different ways. Slow it down. Talk about it with someone else, It's always big with people saying, talk about your problems, but musicians don't typically do that, a lot. You say, I'm having trouble with this line, or I don't know what to do with the bridge of rhythm changes, and somebody's got some idea. Just talking about I can't tell you how many times that I've talked about a problem that I'm having musically, and as I'm talking about it, an answer presents itself. It could be just listening to it some more. Related to that, when I was a first year music student, and I didn't know anything, I was in an improv class. And this is where we were kind of like my combo class. We were playing jazz standards and soloing. And, I was walking lines and playing bossa grooves and working with the chord charts. And I couldn't figure out how my instructor knew which scale to play against which chord. He was all the time railing out, play Dorian against this, or play Lydian against this. It's really basic stuff to me, but at the time, not really. He'd say, Phil, play Dorian over this D minor chord. He had me learn all the modes. He'd say, walk Mixolydian, a dominant scale right over these 5 chords. But I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I was like, why does this fit like this? How does he do that? And he's a cryptic guy, great teacher though. And I asked him after class, I said, how do you know which scale to put on which chord? And he looked at me, man, he was cryptic again. He says, think about it, sport. And he walked off. And I did think about it. And then I didn't think about it. Then I did some more. And then I was looking at a poster of the bass neck on the wall of my room. And there were arpeggios detailed on this oversized poster of the bass neck. And I wasn't really thinking about what we were doing in class. I was just looking at the arpeggios, and it hit me. I was like, the arpeggios, the scale, the chords, right? I can superimpose the arpeggios against the scale, and they'll fit perfectly if I'm doing the right one. I can take the notes of C major 7, C, E, G, B, and they'll fit into a C major scale. That's it. That's the chord scale theory. He was right, in making me think about it, right? It was a little off-putting when he first told me that, but it was really the thing to do, because I became a chord scale theory guy very quickly after that. Thinking about what I was doing, thinking about the different scales, and okay, yeah, an alt, a D alt, right? An altered dominant chord. There's a lot of scales that can fit over that, but why? But thinking about it, making stuff. If you're not working on something new, begin to do so, or if you're not finishing something, start getting ready to finish it, right? Challenge yourself and deal with it. I'll talk to you next time. You can email me at phil@basscase.co.